It is 3 p.m. Monday here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to Arirang News. I'm Noadam. Thank you as always for tuning in. We begin over in the US. The US Federal Reserve has slashed its benchmark interest rate to a target range of 0 to 0.25%, a level not seen since the 2008 global financial crisis. The rates had previously been set at 1 to 1.25%. The emergency rate cut is aimed at helping the U.S. economy get through the COVID-19 outbreak. The Fed is also going to launch a $700 billion quantitative easing program on Monday. It'll be in the form of $500 billion of treasuries and $200 billion of agency-backed mortgage securities. In addition, the Fed said it'll work with other major central banks to increase dollar liquidity through existing swap arrangements. South Korea's finance ministry, meanwhile, says the government and the related authorities will take additional measures to stabilize the market and supply liquidity if needed. This is according to the Vice Finance Minister Kim Yong-bum after a meeting this morning where related officials discussed the economic damage South Korea could face over the growing market uncertainty due to the coronavirus outbreak. The meeting follows the Fed's rate cut, which is putting intense pressure on the Bank of Korea to do the same. The BOK has already hinted it will hold an emergency rate-setting meeting in the next 1 or 2 days. The central bank's benchmark rate is currently at 1.25%. That was left unchanged during its monetary board meeting late last month. Now, South Korea reported 74 new cases of COVID-19 on Monday, the second day in a row. There were fewer than 100. This brings the total number of confirmed cases in the country to just over 8,200. Of the new cases, 35 were reported in Daegu and 7 in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Gyeonggi-do province saw 20 new cases from a cluster infection at a church in Seongnam. No additional deaths were reported, leaving the death toll in Korea at 75. In a briefing, Vice Minister of Health Kim Gang-nip emphasized the importance of social distancing. He also suggested that the government's considering another delay in the start of the school year. Looking elsewhere now, and following the surge in number of coronavirus cases in Italy, a number of other European nations are also seeing their numbers spike. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Last Friday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said Europe had become the new epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, saying more cases and deaths have been reported in the region than the rest of the world combined, apart from China. As of Sunday, more than 67,000 cases and over 2,300 deaths have been confirmed in Europe. Italy added over 3,500 more cases on Sunday, raising the total to over 24,000. It also reported 368 more deaths, surpassing 1,800. Other European nations are continuing to see a surge, with Spain reporting over 1,400 confirmed cases and 96 deaths, while Germany added over 1,200 cases and 2 deaths. Despite the spike in number of confirmed cases, Germany has seen a relatively low death toll at 11. The World Trade Organization also announced last week that it's canceling all meetings until March 20th, after one of its employees was diagnosed with the virus. Aside from workers who need to be present, all employees have been advised to work from home to practice social distancing. In addition, the UN's Geneva office is not allowing visitors to prevent further spread of the virus. Amid the outbreak in Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron announced last Friday that G7 leaders will hold an extraordinary leaders summit via video conference on Monday. According to Macron, the leaders will coordinate research efforts on a vaccine and treatments while working on an economic and financial response. With Switzerland also seeing an alarming rise in cases, observers fear it could disrupt the many international agencies located in the country. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea is now implementing special quarantine measures on all arrivals from Europe. Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun said the number of countries subject to the special measures has been expanded to include all European nations. Previously, South Korea had only deemed special screening measures necessary for flights from Italy, France, Germany, Spain, the UK and the Netherlands. Korea has also implemented similar measures for arrivals from China, Japan and Iran. The Prime Minister also ordered the Health and Foreign Ministries to review the necessity of additional measures in curbing the inflow of infections from overseas. Now, a senior U.S. health official says the coronavirus outbreak seems to be slowing down in South Korea. Speaking to American broadcaster ABC on Sunday, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said the outbreaks in South Korea and China seem to be largely winding down, with the number of new cases dropping in both countries recently. He mentioned how China dramatically did social distancing by shutting down the country. But he warned that infections could go back up if personal interactions resume. Fauci also told CBS that depending on how effectively the US responds to the outbreak, the country should be able to stop the virus from spreading further. Now, a growing number of governments are sealing their borders over coronavirus fears, and some are even blaming foreigners for the virus. But many experts are now worried the global health crisis could also turn into a diplomatic disaster. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Government should draw a line between public health and politics when tackling COVID-19. That's according to experts in an interview with Arirang News on Monday. As countries around the world enforce bans and restrictions on incoming travellers, these actions could end up harming global cooperation rather than benefiting public health. Japan, for instance, decided to place travel restrictions on those coming from South Korea without prior consultation. Seoul then responded in kind.
You've got two highly technologically advanced countries. South Korea's work in testing for this virus is an example to the world. And actually, to build up old disputes and use this virus as a means to raise those disputes again is highly, highly dangerous, and just shows the rise of populist nationalism that really is all too prevalent in the world at the moment.
In fact, a number of world leaders have pointed the finger at immigrants or other countries as a whole for causing and spreading COVID-19.
I think the first country that began to point fingers was, in fact, the country where the disease originally emanated from, and that was China. China and Russia have both been issuing rather strange statements recently, at least public officials have from those countries, to the effect that the virus started with a U.S. Army operation of some kind. They were even suggesting biological warfare or some very strange theory, and that's not helpful to the situation.
Government leaders should rather encourage global solidarity in tackling the crisis. Experts highlighted the South Korean government's transparency and spirit of cooperation amid the crisis.
I was very impressed by your own Foreign Minister Kang this morning. She was on the BBC in England talking about how South Korea has faced up to this problem. Transparency, being honest with the population early, unlike China. I'd love to know what's happening in Russia. Nobody seems to know what's happening there at all.
Kang Kyung-ah told the BBC on Sunday local time that extensive testing has been the key to South Korea's low coronavirus fatality rate, and that governments have the responsibility to guard against panic. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Well over half of the Japanese public think Japan should postpone or cancel the Tokyo 2020 Olympics amid the spreading coronavirus. Japanese sports newspaper Sports Hochi conducted a survey last Friday in which 62% of some 500 respondents said the Games should be postponed. 19% said the event should be called off altogether. In a survey conducted by another Japanese sports daily, nearly 60% of the 890 respondents said Japan should postpone the 2020 Olympics. For now, the Summer Games is set to open on July 24th and run through August 9th. Former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder has sent a letter to President Moon Jae-in as well as a donation to the city of Daegu, saying he would like to send his sincerity to where he calls his second home. The Blue House posted on its social media page that the ex-chancellor expressed his concern about the COVID-19 situation in Korea. He said the country is dealing with the outbreak resolutely and transparently and has taken positive measures compared to other countries. In 2018, Schröder married his Korean translator. Now, for many people, using public transport to get around is their only option, and many are concerned about the spread of the coronavirus through subway trains and buses. In a bid to put passengers' minds at ease, bus companies have stepped up efforts to sterilize their buses. Kim Bo-kyung shows us more.
As each bus enters the depot, people wearing protective suits go on board. They sterilize the inside of the bus to reduce the spread of COVID-19 on Seoul's public transport.
The first bus starts at 5 a.m. and the last one comes in past midnight. Every bus goes on different routes. Buses with shorter routes come here 16 times a day, and buses with longer routes come here 5 times a day. Whenever a bus completes its route once, it comes here to get sterilized.
Right after buses come into the depot, ultrafine particle sterilizer is sprayed.
To make sure no traces of the virus remain, workers soak the clothes with sterilizer and wipe the handles and seats one more time.
As well as spraying and wiping down the buses several times a day, the whole garage is sterilized every 3 or 4 days. Bus drivers also take part in sterilizing the inside of the bus while on their routes. They are given personal sanitizing sprays so that they can sterilize the areas near the driver's seat and the parts of the bus that passengers often touch. Drivers also ask passengers to wear masks and clean their hands using the sanitation gel provided next to the bus doors when getting on and off the bus.
These days, citizens are very worried about the virus, but there are some who do not wear masks. If you're not wearing a mask, please follow the proper etiquette, such as covering your mouth when sneezing.
Through joint efforts, public transport can stay clean and sanitized to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea and the United States are set to hold their 7th round of negotiations on this year's defense cost-sharing this week. Seoul's top negotiator, Jong Eun-bo, is to leave for LA this evening for 2 days of talks starting Tuesday local time. The two sides are meeting for the first time in 2 months after their expected meeting in Seoul in February did not take place. Seoul and Washington are still far apart on how much South Korea should be paying to host American troops this year. The US has reportedly stepped back from its initial request for South Korea to pay $5 billion, but Seoul sees the amount as excessive. Now, recent satellite images appear to show that specialized rail cars are being moved at North Korea's main nuclear site. According to the US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North on Sunday, 3 rail cars that arrived at the Yeongbyeon Nuclear Center by February 10th had departed by the end of the month. The website noted the movement suggests the North could have been transporting reagents used in nuclear fuel production or waste handling and decontamination processes. However, there was no evidence the transported products were radioactive. The website added there was some fresh snowfall on some of the facilities, but noted that cannot prove the suspension of its operation. OK, that is all the news that we have for you at this hour. Join us again at 5 p.m. for more Arirang news. Until then, goodbye.